Good afternoon, everyone, and this is Bonnie Vandermillen, Training Coordinator for Wisconsin Facets. On behalf of our entire Wisconsin Facets staff, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Today, the title of our webinar is Using iApps to Support Independence, Organization, and Regulation. Our speaker today is Lori Langto. Lori is a registered occupational therapist with extensive experience working with students with a wide variety of disabilities. In the past 15 years, her work has been focused primarily on supporting students with mental health concerns and autism. She believes strongly in the inclusive practices and in challenging the culture and environment of our classrooms to better support students in their least restrictive environment. She has established supportive technology groups with students who benefit from access to universal tools. She currently supports staff and students in 15 school districts, serving as the autism consultant coach with the CISA's Allies in Autism Education and providing more traditional program support in multiple districts. It is my pleasure today to introduce to you Elizabeth Langto. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Bonnie. Thanks everyone for joining us. I appreciate you being here. This is a really broad topic, and I realize that there are very varying levels of expertise in this area. So hopefully I've got something for everyone. Hopefully I've kind of hit a sweet spot in terms of level of technicality. But if there is something that you want more information on or that you don't understand, please feel free to ask those questions as we go. It's probably easier to ask them when we're on a certain slide or talking about a specific topic as opposed to fielding those at the end. So Bonnie kind of gave my background. I am trained as an occupational therapist, but do work in 15 school districts providing support to some of our trickier students with autism spectrum disorder and working with staff on implementing research-based practices with our students with autism spectrum disorder. I also do end up getting involved in some of the trickier cases for some of our students with mental health issues. So what we're going to go through today are talking about, in general, just some generalities around using iDevices as a tool. Some of the basics are integrated tools. I think there are many tools that exist before you even download an app that often folks aren't aware of that can be really helpful. Just some notes on cases and accessories. I won't get real deep into some of that, but I did want to make sure that you had those resources available to you and that they were in this presentation. I also have a number of videos as I get into an overview of a variety of apps that would be supportive to our students. And I probably will only play, in some cases, I tried to make them pretty brief, but some of them are 4 or 5 minutes long, and I probably will only play a portion of that, just in the interest of time and in getting through the content in an hour. But again, the full videos are embedded in this presentation, so if you want to go back and get more information on a specific app, you should be able to do that. I kind of covered the areas of communication, independence, and regulation, sort of highlighting apps within each of those categories that I really like. Certainly there are others, and then within those categories or those lists, I tried to highlight just a couple to kind of get a little bit deeper into them so you could see how you might be able to use them. And just a note as we move forward on independence, probably this comes in part because of my training as an occupational therapist, but I pull out these 3 circles a lot when I'm working on student programming or if things just feel out of balance with the students that I work with. And sometimes I'll pull this out and I will write in the circles, what are we doing to support the academic achievement of this student? What are we doing to support his or her social development? What are we doing to support his independence? And I think sometimes when things don't feel like they're running quite right, it's really this independence circle that gets lost. You know, if a student can use the Pythagorean theorem but can't do it independently, I'm not sure how useful that skill is. If a student can ask a student to play with them at recess time with the support of a speech therapist but can't do it independently, then I think we're kind of falling down on helping that student to be successful in life, because we have to be able to do all of these things within the context of independence. So just a quick cautionary note when we talk about high tech. It's okay to have all low tech supports for a student. So having all visual supports that are printed off or laminated or board maker, having those be all low tech is perfectly fine. If you're going to go high tech, so have, for example, a student's schedule, their visual schedule on an iPad, we just really need to make sure that we've got a low tech backup. So what that might look like for a visual schedule, for example, is just having a printed copy of it. Sometimes it's as simple as taking pictures or screenshots of what's on the iPad and having those printed off, because technology isn't 100% reliable. So we do have to make sure that we've got a backup for those. So I want to spend some time just on the integrated tools that come with every iPad and how you might be able to use those. First of all, the calendar tool. I know personally I use this with my family to keep us all on the same page. The ability to sync your calendar across devices is really very helpful. The notes option, when I get a little bit further into some of the apps that support independence, one of the things I'm going to demonstrate to you are some tools that can help our students with word prediction, so some writing tools. But there are times that, if a student is using those kinds of apps for the bulk of their writing, tools that maybe will help predict, do some word prediction for them, or some voice to text or dictation, there may be other times that you don't really want the student to have access to that. For example, during a spelling test, and where we wouldn't want to be inside of a word prediction app. So that would be a place to use notes. Also, just keeping lists of things that the student needs to do or keeping their agenda in there is helpful. Obviously, the email tool, the messaging tool, using clocks and alarms. And there are a couple of hidden tools in clocks and alarms that I'm going to get a little bit more in detail with. But something as simple as, I had a student last year that we were working, he'd got his first phone, he was a high school student, and one of the things that was important to his mom was that when he came home from a work experience, he had graduated, and so he was staying in school till he was 21. And she wanted, when he came home from a work experience, which varied in time from day to day, she wanted him to call her. And so we worked with that student on setting an alarm to remind him to call his mom every day when he got home from his work experience. So we wanted that alarm to serve as a visual support or as an auditory support, so someone else didn't have to remind him to do that. And the iPad can be really effective in helping our students to do those things without any kind of adult prompting. And then, of course, there's Siri, who can come with us everywhere and answer all kinds of questions. We can get on the internet with our iPads. We can use the camera and photos. And, a lot of times I'll have kids, one of the things that kids really struggle with in school is organization. A lot of our kiddos with special needs struggle with making sure they've got the materials that they need at home to complete their homework, and that they have documented what they need to complete. And sometimes writing gets in the way of that because of motor planning issues, handwriting issues, spelling issues, just time. If it takes the student a long time to copy down what's on the board, then a really simple strategy is to just have them take a picture of the homework board at the end of the day and keep that in their photos. So, just some kind of unconventional ways to use that. Obviously, there's the calculator, there's music, which is great for regulation, relaxation, weather, which again can really help our students. If we can teach students how to check the weather and then make determinations independently, safe determinations about what appropriate attire might be, that's another good independent skill. Videos and movies, I am going to get into some apps for video modeling to support independent skill acquisition. And then voice memos. So sometimes, I'm going to get, as I said, more in depth into some of the writing supports that are available in the iPad in with certain apps. So some of the word prediction or the voice to text. But sometimes these tools are hard for some of our kids. Sometimes we have students with articulation challenges that make using a tool like Dragon Dictation really difficult or impossible and really frustrating because the words don't populate the way the student intends for them to populate. And for those kiddos, I will use voice memos. So they could leave auditory responses for classroom work um, and do that independently. I would much rather than using the voice memo in question than have them have a paraprofessional or support member sitting next to them scribing their work. You know, really want to focus on if we can have this, give the student a support that they can complete a task with more independence, we always would want to go that direction, as long as the student's articulation is able to be heard by, understood by the listener. So just an overview of the reasons why we would really like to use iTools. And I'm probably going to use the term iPad as I move forward in this presentation, but I am referring also to iPhones and iPods. Obviously, many of them have the same kinds of functionality. So they support convergent learning. There's a lot of work now on divergent learning, and kind of that growth mindset. Those are the buzzwords, you know, and really convergent learning is more linear in nature. It is following instructions, usually solving problems with one right answer, kind of that more concrete learning, which iDevices do a really good job with. So convergent learning is getting kind of a little bit of a bad rap because just the buzz lately is all about divergent learning. But the fact of the matter is, for a lot of our students with special needs, certainly a lot of our students with autism spectrum disorder, that's a strength, that concrete, literal kind of learning. And there certainly are applications and important pieces of that, particularly in, you know, in subjects where there usually is one right answer, such as mathematics. Real world learning, these are portable. We can use them anytime, anywhere. They promote 21st century success, which is very technology based. It pairs the audio and the visual. They're very portable. Supports differentiating learning. So, you know, obviously as a student, there are over 1 million educational apps. So obviously you can find something for students at every level. They're pretty cool. Kids like technology, and a lot of kids with special needs have kind of a high interest in technology. So it's more motivating for a lot of our students to use these kinds of iDevices for their work. And you know, they've really come down a lot in price. You can really get a lot of bang for your buck. So just to kind of emphasize that these tools can work for students. Like the understandability of using an iPad is so intuitive. This little boy is 2 years old, and this is just about a 2-minute video, but just watch how he's navigating using his iPad.
Hi, this is Bridger. Say hi, Bridger.
Hey, Bridger.
He is playing with the iPad, and he just turned 2. So, why don't you show us, first of all, draw us a picture.
No.
Yeah, draw us a picture, Bridger.
Dinosaur.
No, draw us a picture first.
Okay.
Sweet. I'm excited. Oh.
This?
Yeah.
I want to draw one.
Do a new one.
Okay. I want to draw one.
Yeah. Why don't you draw a squiggly line? You're so smart, Bridger. Draw us something.
Okay.
Oh, you want to change the background to blue.
Yeah. Blue.
Why don't you show us the stamp, like the car stamp? Or motorcycle stamp.
Okay. You want a dolphin, okay?
You want to find a dolphin?
Yeah.
Okay, you think there is one in there?
Yeah.
Hopefully. Ooh, there's some other animals. Why don't you pick another animal?
Dinosaur.
Ooh, yeah, do the dinosaur.
Is it dinosaur color?
Whoa, nice. Now draw a picture.
Okay.
Do you like being two? Whoa. That is awesome, Bridger. You know what, Bridger? I think you should show us Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Will you show us that program? Please?
Ooh, that's pretty good.
Wow, that looks nice. What do you want to do? Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or Word World?
No, we're wrong.
Okay, show me Word World.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop that right there. But what I kind of wanted you to see in there was, just even at that, 24 months age, he's got the basics down of scrolling, using the home button, switching between apps. It's pretty phenomenal to watch that kind of learning. I think the dad was hilarious there because, that he's 2, and so the boy is saying, no all the time, and then he says, let's do Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and he gets no response, and then he moves to the strategy of, how about I offer you a choice, which is just always interesting too, how those things work with our kiddos. So just some basics. You saw that little boy use the home button to escape apps, the controls to double click, swipe right, closing apps. Sometimes people will leave lots and lots of apps open, and so if you double click on that home button, the apps will come up smaller and you're able to swipe them away so they're closed, and that really will save your battery life. And I'm going to get a little bit more into some of the accessibility features and guided access. Moving apps around and organizing folders, I think this is something that most people are familiar with, kind of holding your finger on the app and they start to wiggle and you can bring them together to organize folders. If you see apps that say Lite, it's usually a free or reduced version of the app, and it gives you an opportunity to try an app out to see if you like it before spending more money on the more expensive versions of the apps. Some control features for parents or teachers: hiding apps, so making a folder where you maybe put some of the system settings, or even I've got a student that we keep the Safari icon pretty buried in a folder so that he can't get at it, because otherwise it will be very difficult to get him off of YouTube. He does know how to turn the access to the internet on, but if he didn't, that would be another option, that you can go into settings and go into airplane mode so that you can't access things on the internet. Sometimes having more than one device available. I have students with significant communication challenges who also are fairly dysregulated students. I have one student in particular who's quite aggressive, can be quite aggressive, but one of the things that's been really supportive to him is to make sure he has 2 devices available. So one of them, the only thing we have on it, is Proloquo, which is a speech generating tool that he uses to communicate. It is in a different color case, so that is very different for him. And then the other device has other tools and things on it that he can use, and some rewarding and fun things on it. What was happening prior to that is we would lock him into Proloquo on a single device where he had his communication tool along with other things, and he knew there were other things on that particular iPad, and he knew we had locked him into his communication tool, and that was not motivating for him, and so he would get very angry, understandably, and he broke a number of iPads because of that.
Elizabeth, we do have a question. The question is, under restrictions, can you turn off Safari? And they do this with their son.
Turning off Safari?
That's what I have here, that under restrictions you can turn off Safari, and they do that with their particular son.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I will definitely look into doing that. So all I've done so far with that is just disable the internet or bury or hide the folder, but I will definitely look into that. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And then also using the stop playing feature. So I'm going to show you two tools that I share these with a lot of teachers, a lot of staff in districts, and they're usually like, these are really kind of life-changing, because because they can just be so helpful. So guided access is a feature that locks in an app that prevents you from hitting the home button to exit the app. So for example, the student that I was just talking about, we would lock him into his communication tool. I have another student who recently got an iPad last year. He's a third grade student. Comes from a family without a lot of resources. We were able to get county funding for an iPad. He's nonverbal. And we were able to get county funding for an iPad and then for the app Proloquo, which is a $300 app. So it's quite costly. And the concern was he has three younger siblings at home. And the concern was that when this tool would go home with him, it would no longer be looked at as his voice. And we really wanted this tool to be viewed as his voice. And that, you know, some of his younger siblings would think of it as a really cool novel toy, which is totally understandable. So we did make sure at school before he left every day to lock him into Proloquo. So that was the only app that could be accessed when he was at home. And you can also lock in certain websites too with this tool. So I'm going to just demonstrate this, a kind of a, you know, show me, don't tell me. A picture is worth 1,000 words. This is just a little video that shows you how to turn that guided access on.
The guided access feature of the iPad allows you to temporarily restrict your iPad device to a particular app. This is a nice classroom management feature if you have an iPad that you want to limit to a certain application. Guided access must be set up ahead of time on each iPad individually, so it is not a tool you can quickly use to lock down app access for an entire classroom of iPads. To set up guided access, go to Settings, General, Accessibility, and tap on Guided Access. Turn Guided Access on. Tap on Set Passcode and set the passcode that will be used when guided access is enabled. If you want, tap on Enable Screen Sleep. This will dim the screen after a period of inactivity. Now you're ready to use guided access. Open the app you want students to use. Triple click on the home button. At the bottom of the screen, you will see 3 buttons. It's recommended to leave these settings as they are unless you wish to disable certain features. To begin, tap the Start button in the upper right. A student or other user cannot disable guided access without your passcode. When a user presses the home button to go to a different app, he or she will receive a message that they must triple-click the home button to disable guided access. When the user triple-clicks the home button, he or she will be required to enter the passcode, which is only known by the teacher and must be entered correctly to exit the app.
So, and just kind of an important note.
You can even restrict a student to a specific website in Safari and disable their ability to browse to a different website. To do this, before you tap the Start button to enable guided access, draw a box around the upper portion of the browser, including all navigation tools and the search and address bar. This will disable the browsing area after you tap the Start button. Using guided access requires touching each device prior to student use, but it can provide a nice layer of management for devices you want focused on a single purpose.
So that the passcode that you enter for that can also be, it can be the same or different than if you've got a passcode set on the iPad just to get into it in general. The passcode for guided access can be different. So sometimes our students might know those passcodes to get into the iPad generally, but you can make that one different. So that could be something that only the teacher, only the parent knows. So the other feature that is kind of embedded in the clock is the stop playing feature. And this really removes the blame from setting timers and things like that. It's consistent and predictable, and it can be used in conjunction with guided access or independently. And this one I just demonstrated here in this video. So what it's going to do is I'm going to set the timer for a minute. I'm going to set this stop playing feature, and then I'm going to go into an app. And because I set it for a minute, we have to watch it for a minute. And when the minute is up, it takes you back to that lock screen. So it automatically exits the app and takes you to the lock screen where you would have to enter the passcode to get back into it. So that would be a case where you would want to make sure that your student didn't have the general passcode, because if they did, they could just go right back into the app. So it's in the clocks, and then you go down to the timer, and we're just going to set it for 1 minute. And then instead of the sound being, radar or crystals or whatever, all of those, you go all the way down to the bottom and indicate stop playing, and then you save it, and you can start the timer. The timer will run in the background, and you can go into an app. And so here's where you could use it in conjunction with guided access. If you opened up this app and triple clicked, your guided access would be on. This is the Balloon Animal app. So there it just went to lock screen. Now to get back in, I would have to slide to unlock, at which point in time I'd be prompted to enter my passcode again. So if the student doesn't know it, that it kind of can remove that whole transition sometimes of having to take away a device or ask a student to transition away from something that's highly preferred, like an iPad. That can just be really, really helpful, especially if you're trying to manage more than one student, maybe having reward time or regulation time with an iPad. Another embedded feature, this is the last embedded feature that I'm going to cover, is the text-to-speech feature. Whoops. I don't know, that video doesn't look like it's going to work. So again, this is in accessibilities. The text-to-speech feature is, and you can turn that feature on so that, oh, here it goes.
This is Vicki Byers, learning strategist and assistive devices technologist from Lambton College Accessibility Center. Welcome to our first tutorial on how to turn text-to-speech on your iPad or other Apple products. Your text-to-speech will read what's on your screen. To start, I'll have you find your setting on your screen. Tap on that. On the left-hand side, you want to ensure that you're under General Settings. On the right-hand side, about halfway down, you'll see a setting, Accessibility. Tap on the Accessibility setting. The feature that we're going to be turning on is the fourth one down, Speak Selection. You want to ensure that you don't turn your voiceover on. This is something different, and it can be difficult for people to turn on. Select Speak Selection. Move your slider over to ensure that it's on. You will see the green. You'll see the second option is Voices. You do have options of changing voices. For this tutorial, we'll leave ours with English. You also can see that you have a choice of speaking rate. Turtle indicates slower, rabbit indicates faster. Find the speed that works for you. Next is highlighting words, which is a good feature to have turned on, as it'll highlight the words as they're spoken to you. Now we're going to go out to do an example. We'll launch our Safari web browser to find some text. In order to select text, hold down your finger until two blue dots appear. Select the text that you would like spoken. Click the Speak option.
Incorporating new technologies and learning innovations, Lambton College's mobile learning programs offer students an enriched academic experience that expands beyond the classroom.
Use your Speak selection to read what's on your screen, to edit your papers, or any other way that you feel you could use it. Just know that the Speak selection doesn't always work in all types of file formats, so be aware of that when you go to use it. Okay?
So that Speak selection too, if you take a two-finger swipe down, it will automatically read the whole page, so you don't have to select individual sections of the text. So I'm going to cover these next couple of slides really quickly, but again, I wanted you to have the resources, just some good case ideas, cases that I've used with students, students that maybe are prone to some having some difficulties with just being careful of some devices. In general, you just really want to make sure you've got a multi-layer device. So the idea of hard and soft together is going to be most protective. Here are some just different brand names of some ones that I have used. The one at the bottom is has an integrated speaker, so sometimes I will use speaker cases for students that end up using their iPads a lot for regulation and maybe have an aversion to headphones, don't like how that feels. Think about portability, especially when you have a device that's being used for communication. Here are some examples of some cases that a student could carry, like a messenger bag style, and very easily have for communication. And also think about, just looking like the other kids. So I like some of the running bands. Sometimes you just have to experiment with them. A lot of the kids that I work with aren't comfortable having a phone in their pockets. They don't like how that feels. And a lot of the students, I work with a number of students who are low or nonverbal and use iPads to communicate. And so those I want to make sure aren't something that they have to kind of fidget a lot with to get at. We want them to have quick, easy access to their voice at all times. It's just some other case ideas here. A note on some accessories that you might find useful. You can buy bub caps, which are home button covers, and this kind of prevents a kiddo from, you really have to have a pretty firm touch in order to activate the home button. So another way to sort of lock a student into an app. If you've got a kiddo that's really having problem with finger isolation, and you can take knit gloves and cut out just the index finger, so that way if their other fingers are accidentally touching the screen, they won't necessarily activate any features or any buttons on the iPad. Highly recommend the impact glass screen protectors. They're different from the traditional screen protectors. Generally they come in different millimeters of thicknesses, but really have seen those be very, very helpful with some of my students who are, again, maybe prone to not being quite as careful with their iPads as I have them on. All of my kids have them on their phones too. It just adds another layer of protection. Bluetooth keyboards and speakers. Sometimes I will have a Bluetooth speaker for a student who for example, I've got a student who was, when I met him, he was nonverbal in 6th grade. And I spent about a half a day with him, and by the end of that half a day, he was using my iPad and a speech generating tool to communicate a lot of different things. So communicate sort of high interest things that he wanted. He would ask for things. He had never had the opportunity to speak, and later that year he actually ran his own student-led IEP, and we did connect a Bluetooth speaker so that he could present to a bigger group his material, because it was just the speaker on the iPad wasn't sufficient enough. I really like the Bluetooth keyboards when we get into using iPads for typing or for writing support, because it's just a really transferable skill then to a more traditional keyboard. So I do generally use those, although the research out now is that kids can actually text faster because they're so accustomed to doing that than a lot of adults can use a keyboard to type. So maybe that's kind of antiquated technology. But I do typically use a Bluetooth keyboard when I'm using an iPad for writing support. Some stylus options. These are some ones that I use a lot. The Cosmonaut is a wide grip one, so that can be nice for students that maybe have challenges with grip or motor skills, or some of our younger students or younger learners. So there are over 2 million apps. We're going to get into some specific apps now, and I did mention that those light versions give you the opportunity to try things out. Don't be afraid to look into funding for some of these tools. I was in a district last spring and they asked me to come and take a look at a student. I spent probably 5 minutes with him and thought, oh my gosh, this little guy is so smart, but he was very nonverbal, had no functional language, and I went and grabbed my iPad and I pulled out my speech generating tool, and literally within 10 minutes he was putting compound sentences together. He was saying, he had a really strong interest in sea creatures, and so we had some sea creatures and I was kind of controlling that resource, and he had to ask for them, and he was saying, you know, I want the whale and the shark, and he was using the iPad to do all of that talking for him. So the teacher kind of took a video of him on the fly and showed it to mom after school. And none of them had ever experimented with something like that with him. And it was about 3 weeks later we had the county had approved funding for both the iPad and the app, and so he was able to go home with that tool over the summer and have that. So generally how that works, and I worked with that school district on how to make that happen. Those that particular student had a county caseworker, and so that is a piece of that needs to happen, and that request needs to be initiated by a parent. So I've actually had parents come into school and sit next to me and, you know, helped them, kind of guided them through initiating that request. Once that request is made, school can support you in putting together a letter, a justification letter indicating, you know, that this is the tool that we recommend, these are the results that we've seen at school. Schools are required to provide students with a way to communicate if that is a part of you know, if that is a challenge that's identified in their IEP. But unfortunately, they're not required to provide families with a tool that may go back and forth from home to school. And, you know, that's just a little bit mean, I think, to, you know, tell a kiddo, like, you get a voice at school, but you don't get one at home or in the community. So usually schools, or your school, or your speech therapist, or your special ed teacher should be able to provide some support in putting together a letter of justification for you to share with the county. So in that case, it was just a few weeks. But we also have a local resource, the Kiwanis, Wisconsin, Upper Michigan Autism Grant this is kind of a mission. So they've got money set aside. I think they've donated almost $300,000 to exactly this type of device. In the county, I provide program support for the 5 school districts that are in Calumet County, that are exclusively in Calumet County. And every year I usually put in for 2 or 3 of these, and I've never been denied them. So I usually write up a statement of need, but you can go to that website too to look for the application. The application is really pretty simple. And I usually just include a statement of need. So, and in that statement of need, I usually, you know, really make sure to include really cool things about the kid, and then, you know, what are some challenges and what kinds of tools we think might support them to be more independent or more, just better able to function in both school and life settings. Another tool to look at when you're looking at an app is that a lot of apps are reviewed on YouTube, and so you can go to YouTube and just kind of watch the app in action. Or if you get an app and you're not really sure how to use it, again, it's that idea that, you know, I always say with our kids on the spectrum that it's just much more powerful to show them. Show me, don't tell me. And it's the same for us. We're not that different than our little people. So I think, you know, going to YouTube and just watching how an app is used can often help you to just be a lot more proficient with it much more quickly. So your best first app that I would recommend after we get past kind of all those basic integrated tools in the iPad is a free app called Autism Apps. They update this all the time. It reviews apps. They're separated into categories. They are searchable by content, so it's really a good place, and they're reviewed, so it's really a good place to kind of weed through that, because there's a lot of apps out there that you can spend a lot of time sorting through that, you know, maybe aren't super fantastic, and it's really time consuming to sort through them all. So that's a good place to start. I wanted you to have this visual as well. It is just a visual of the different domains that we are often dealing with, not just with autism spectrum disorder, but other disabilities. Kind of what is the domain that we're looking at, and then the very outer circle has some recommendations of apps that are specific to dealing with that particular, to supporting development of social skills or communication or appropriate behavior. That very outer gray circle has a list of some of those apps. So I just wanted to share that with you. That was developed by a speech therapist, Mark Coppin, in October of 2012. So again, a lot has changed in 4 years when it comes to apps, but a lot of these apps that are listed on here are apps that I have on my iPad, And it gives you another way to kind of sort through that dizzying 2 million apps that are available. So now I just want to get into those three categories of communication, organization, and independence later on in the presentation. And I know I'm watching my time, but I have more content in here than what we're going to need. But I did have kind of a hard time narrowing it down to just those three areas. So I do include later on just some apps for things such as social skill development and pre-K readiness skills. So I probably won't get a chance to go into those, but I did list later on in the presentation 4 or 5 in each of those domains, so that'll be a good place for you just to kind of get started. So communication, I am going to play not all of this because we don't have time for it, but it's a fantastic video that shows an individual with autism spectrum disorder using his iPad to communicate.
Dylan was born in 1999. It was really a pleasure to finally be a mother, but it was a little bit of a roller coaster. By his second birthday, there was a lot of screaming and crying and frustration that we didn't necessarily understand. We didn't know what was happening. But by 2.5, I think we pretty much knew.
When I first met Dylan, he was that kid that those of us in the field would identify as the most challenged.
One of the challenges is in the area of not having communication, not having a way to know what he's thinking and feeling.
We just fall back on our preconceived notions that if you're not making eye contact with me, you must not be listening to me, you must not understand me.
If you're just going off of what you see on the outside, the assumption is often that, that there's lack of intelligence. Not being able to speak isn't the same as not having something to say.
Dylan is an individual who types to communicate his thoughts. Basically, Dylan types his thoughts out letter by letter to spell out words and then sentences, paragraphs. When he began typing, he said it was like being freed.
As his mom, it's just the most incredible thing ever to suddenly start to hear your child's voice.
My name is Dylan, and I am autistic. Having autism is like being in hell, and it is a lonely existence. Before I could type, I had no choice but create relationships with my animals. Without a voice, people only see my autism and not the real me. People hold me a voice, not only so they be heard, but fully understood and known.
There was one day that we were in a history class, and Dylan was having a hard time, and it was a particularly tough day. He put his face down, and he just burst into tears. And I remember sitting there feeling really helpless. We took a break, and we sat outside, and I told Dylan, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure I'm the right person to help you. And then the bell rang and we moved on to the next class. I opened up the iPad and I asked him a question and he typed the words, appreciate all you give, always. And I thought, there you are. He was basically saying, you're on the right track, Debbie, don't give up.
Hearing Dylan's voice is incredible. It's been life-changing. He's insightful, he's smart, and creative.
So I'm going to stop that there, but you can certainly go back and watch the rest of that. That over again. Students graduate from over the Wisconsin without a voice. It makes me really sad to see. Often I go into classrooms and teachers will identify a behavior as their biggest problem. So that behavior, I had a situation a couple of years ago where the behavior the teacher identified was a problem was that the student would lay on the ground and take really long periods of time to transition, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And I kind of was my first time in that school district, and I kind of looked around and I said, how does he communicate? And she said, well, he doesn't really. And I said, well, he is communicating with you. The sixth grade student that I shared the story about before, that school district, when they contacted me, they said, we really are trying to move towards more inclusive practices, but we can't put this student in a classroom with his peers because he screeches. It was like a baby pterodactyl noise. He screeches all the time. So that's what they identify as the issue. And when I went there, I said, well, he's communicating, that he doesn't have any other way to communicate. So the solution, how you extinguish those behaviors, is you have to put a voice in their hands. You have to give them some way to communicate. And how you do that, how you go about that can be challenging. Finding something that the student is motivated to communicate about is sometimes challenging. I had a student last year that we were trying to find something that he was really motivated to communicate about, and we thought, well, he likes puzzles, so I'll control all the pieces to the puzzles and he'll have to ask for them. And his solution was he was so passive, he would get up and he'd walk away and just pick a different puzzle. And we spent a number of hours trying to find a hook for him to see if this tool might be a viable option for him. And finally it was music time and he just lit up. And so I just quickly put a more button on the iPad, and I pressed pause on the teacher's on her music playing device. And he really wanted that music. He wanted more of that music. And so that was really the hook. By the end of that week, he was using his device to request particular songs, but he had to put that connection together, that I am a communicator, I get to communicate. There's a whole host of things that go along. I could do a whole presentation, I could do a whole half-day workshop on using the iPad to communicate and the importance of it, but we're just kind of going through this as an overview. So some options here. The Sonaflex is a really popular one. Proloquo is one that I use a lot. It has a branching tool and is very flexible. It can grow with an individual. Also has the keyboard. There are some communication apps too, like what Dylan was using, where it is just typing to text. But unlocking that for a family and being able to hear the voice of your child is just really priceless. Some just apps, here are some just names of particular apps beyond communication that support language development. So again, you can, I really like a lot of the apps by the Conover and Company. Those talkers are fun. They repeat back what you're saying, but usually in the voice of a certain character. And those can be really motivating for our kiddos. I'm going to move on to organization. This is probably my favorite scheduling app that I use for my students. It's called First Then Visual Schedule, FVTS, and I like it for a number of reasons. It is easy to have embedded task analysis, so kind of breaking down routines. So on this example here, it's it has first thens, it has the morning school routine, and then it can branch off to what does that look like. It's very easy to embed video models. So I have a student who uses this to navigate his day, and we actually have a video model on there of every transition that he makes in the building. We have a video model of himself completing that transition successfully. And as long as he follows that routine and watches that video model of himself, he won't pull the fire alarm. If he does not watch that video model of himself completing that transition successfully, he is very likely to pull a fire alarm. So I'm going to play just a little bit of this so you can get a flavor of it.
This is the First Then schedule, which is a visual to-do list. There are several ways to use this app. It's great for children that need a visual schedule for daily routines or even novel events, showing them visually what's going to happen, particularly if having that they need a visual schedule to comprehend the events. Look at a morning school routine. So different ways in this full mode here, going to the bathroom, getting dressed, eating breakfast, brushing teeth, and getting ready for school. Split mode gives you just a different orientation of the schedule, as does the list mode. So if I go back to schedules, you can make it a simple.
So from there, you also are able to lay that out so that the student has to move an icon from one side to the all done side. There's a view where they have to put it into an envelope. So it's really customizable in terms of how much information you want to display to your student. Embedding that video is very easy for your students or your children to activate on their own and to access independently whenever we're using any kind of visual support, whether it's high tech or low tech. We want our kids to use it themselves. We want to teach them to use the tool themselves, just like we all use our calendars by ourselves without somebody following us around telling us, to check our calendars. We're able to use those tools on our own. So here's a list of some organization apps. I do have a couple of videos embedded in this presentation for some of my favorites for ChoiceWorks, for the video scheduler, and we're not going to have time to look at those together, but Bonnie says this presentation is being recorded and archived, so you will be able to access it and look at those on your own if that's something of particular interest to you. The time timer app is something that a lot of people like. There are also sand timers. But visual timers are a tool that is often very, very helpful for our students with disabilities. The iSequence app, the To-Do app, and I am going to play a little bit of the iStudies Pro, just because I feel like the visual schedule is kind of free into maybe the middle school years, depending on the level of the student, and the iStudies Pro is a good so this is the ChoiceWorks overview. These are all videos that you can access at the end of the presentation. But I am going to play a little bit of this one because it gives you the flavor of.
I'm Tina. My life
these
is
are
filled
also
with
for
a
older
mix
students.
of different activities, just plain craziness. That's why I use iStudies Pro, an easy app that helps me stay organized. My schedule into the app. Summary of the classes, assignments, and tasks I have ahead of me. The red flag at the top tells me the AM and political philosophy.
You can see from just the layout of that, it's very appropriate for older students. There are also places in that app to break things down, to indicate responsibilities for group work. So it's a really comprehensive app and very age appropriate for those middle high school students to support their organization. The final category that I was formally cover, but again, I do have, I have regulation and then some more independent skills. And then I do have some other information in this presentation on some other domains if you're interested in exploring that on your own. So some ideas for regulation apps. These are just a list of regulation ideas. Sometimes those high interests can be really, really regulating to some of our kiddos. So I had a teacher last year, towards the end of the year, come to me with a notebook. It had a note in it from a parent, and she said, "I'm not really sure how to respond to this parent." And the note said, this was maybe a 4th or 5th grade student. The note said something about, I'm really struggling with Dylan. All he wants to do and all he wants to talk about are roller coasters and batteries. And I said to the teacher, "Well, what do you like to talk about? What do you like to do?" And she said, "Well, I really like spending time with my grandchildren. I really like gardening." And I said, "Well, how would you feel if I told you those were inappropriate topics and you can't talk about them at school?" These are things that are really important to this kid, and who are we to say that they're not valuable? I would tell his parents, to let him virtually ride every roller coaster in the world on YouTube, and really, maybe he's going to be the first kid to invent a battery-powered roller coaster. But these are strengths. These shouldn't be viewed as, I kind of struggling with some of that language about like restricted areas of interest, because I feel like, well, don't sort of have areas that we're really interested in, and in general, we all sort of like things that we're good at, and we don't like things that we're not good at. I think that's just human nature. So our kiddos with autism spectrum disorder or other disabilities, they're really not all that different from us. It's just, that what they like, what they're really interested in is just a little less mainstream, but it's still really cool. So, looking into those high interest kinds of things and viewing those as something that can be very regulating for kiddos. I have one kiddo that will work just about anything to watch videos of lawn sprinklers because he really likes lawn sprinklers. So here's some other ideas for just some regulation kinds of apps. Try to sort of get a blend of some different things. The binaural beats is kind of an interesting one. The guided meditations are kind of interesting. I'm just going to play about 30 seconds of this guided meditation just to give you a flavor for what those might be.
Make your body comfortable. And when you're ready, close your eyes. Let's start by taking some deep breaths.
So these are kinds of things that can be built right into a student's visual schedule so that we're building in those opportunities to make sure their bodies are regulated proactively as opposed to react when our students get to the point where they are overwhelmed. The binaural beats are kind of really pretty interesting, and a lot of kids really like them because visually they're so stimulating, and then coupled with the sound and the music. I've got teachers at the kindergarten level who are doing these kinds of activities, whole classroom, general education teachers who are doing these kinds of activities, at different times of the day just to really help proactively support the level of regulation of their students. So again, I just wanted to play a little bit of that to give you a flavor of that. So on to the independent living skills. Here are some more examples. Again, you'll see those Conover Company apps come up a lot. I do think those are, in general, really good. I focus a lot with my students on using some of those tools to try to limit or eliminate the person sitting next to them at school. And sometimes support staff get really anxious when I talk about that, and I say, no, you know what, you're just as needed. I just want your role to be different. I want your role to be setting the student up to complete tasks with more independence as opposed to sitting next to them. I want the student to use writing or typing or word prediction or voice recording tools instead of having a scribe. I want them to be able to turn their work in just like other students do. So I really like the Spell Better and the apps. They have word prediction. I'm going to play about just 30 seconds of an example. The iRead is fantastic. It's got both reading and writing support. There's also a version of that in Google for that I use a lot with some of my students in Chromebooks, which will read anything to you, anything on your screen at all to you. So it's a really nice transition from the iPad to the Chromebooks. If I have students transitioning to a grade where maybe the whole grade has Chromebooks, I want my students to have the same tools as their peers as long as they're just as appropriate. So really like that tool. It also has a translation feature in it. It has a dictionary feature in it that includes picture dictionary. And then co-writer is another word prediction one. The Dragon dictation, I think, is one people are more familiar with. That will allow you to speak and it will translate your words to text. And then two that I use a lot for social stories are the interactive whiteboard, which is free. Sometimes I will also use that for writing assignments because it's more like a quick on the fly PowerPoint where kids can insert images, pictures, draw things, and so the demands of writing can be modified for a student to a level where they can be successful. Just going to play a little bit so you can see what this word prediction might look like, and I'm going to fast forward this video so you can. So what will happen is you start to type a word and the system will generate options. And the nice thing too about iRead Write is, sometimes our kiddos can maybe if they're writing the word grandpa, they can sound out grr, but they can't spell it after that. And so it will allow you to have those words, your options read to you. So maybe they can't spell it, maybe they can't even visually recognize it, but once it's generated, they can hear it and they know that that's the right word. And so then the system will
in this screencast, I'd like to show you the new.
I'm just going to have to fast forward this in the interest of time, but I do want you to have access to this so you can come back to it.
In the screen.
And then some video modeling apps that I also like, some video editing ones. I know that wasn't in my title, but I did want to kind of cover the gamut of domains that you might be interested in. So some social relations skills apps, some pre-K readiness skills apps. This is an app that I really like for just supporting writing. It's kind of fun because kids get to write with, you know, blue Jello, and you can enter spelling words, and it really supports that you have to draw in the same direction. Here are a list of some free iPad apps. I like this list of apps. And then I'm just sharing my sites that I like to access to kind of keep up on new apps that come up. So hopefully, you know, my goal here was to help you weed through the over 2 million apps that are out there and help to start at least your focus or your target on some places that I've seen parents and teachers really successful with and students successful with in terms of using, so you don't feel like it's just this overwhelming mountain of apps to try to weed through. So that was sort of my goal here today, to just provide you with that overview, give you some ideas to get started. And Bonnie, I don't know if you're fielding any more questions or...
Actually, we do not have any other questions at this time, except for the fact that some people had trouble downloading the handouts, and I'm wondering if there might be a possibility of you sending your handout again to me without the embedded videos, and then I'll be able to send it out to everybody.
I can definitely resend that out if that was a problem. I can try that in a different format too to see if that might be helpful.
That's great. I appreciate that, and I'd like to thank you, Elizabeth, for your time and your expertise today. It was just great, and there's all kinds of information that I'm sure that people will benefit by. I'm going to stop the recording at this time, and I would just like